Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to continue my segments on analysing the Necron Codex. Today I'm going to look at the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. So one of the, sort of enslaved star gods of the Necrons, taken very different, I think, in terms of lore-wise from where they used to be. But, that's not what I'm analysing. I'm analysing what they do on the tabletop. So how this works, I'm going to have a look at the units sort of stats in the book, then I'm going to have a look at the equipment, which obviously the Catan Shard of the Deceiver only has one, and also the abilities that they can they have, which the Catan Shard of the Deceiver does quite well. I'm just going to have a look at loadout suggestions and roll for the unit. We then look at Dynasty codes, which is in no way applicable for the Catan of the Deceiver. Going to have a look at Catan powers, to say what powers they would benefit from, how they use them, and then have a look at stratagem recommendations. So with that, let's have a look at the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. So the Catan Shard of the Deceiver is a movement 8, which means it's not the fastest, but certainly, quicker than Necrons. Weapon skill and bless skill 2+, which is kind of what you'd expect from something that considers itself a star god. Strength and toughness 7, which is not bad. I'd kind of want it to be 8, for the strength anyway, to give it that bit more punching power, but 7 is nothing to be shy on. Wounds 8, which is not a problem because it is a character, which means it's going to be harder to target because it's got the lower wounds. So that actually works out a bit in its benefit, though it does mean you hit by a few thunder hammers that pretty much kind of put it out of existence quickly. Wounds I've already covered. Attacks 4, which is not bad. I kind of wish it was 5. Leadership 10, which is no problem, and a 4+ save, which is a bit of an issue. Yeah, a bit of an issue. In terms of his abilities, in terms of weapons, it's got a melee weapon called the Star God Fist, the possibly best, named weapon in the game, in my opinion. Debate with me if you want on that one. Name better ones. Strength user, which is strength 7, -4 AP, so no goodbye most armor, and 3 damage. So just a reliable amount of 3 damage, which in net is always something that's quite handy. In terms of abilities, it's got Necrodermis, which the Catan Shard Deceiver has a 4+ invo, which is not bad. I would love for it to be 3. That would certainly bring its survivability a lot higher, but maybe be a bit excessive. As Dredge, your opponent must add 1 to morale test for an enemy unit within 12 inches of the Catan Shard of Deceiver, which is not bad. You might forget that, and it's funny that the Deceiver has it, but the Nightbringer doesn't. The Nightbringer literally looks like an element of death, so bit odd on that one, but fair enough. Grand Illusion, that's where it's all about when it comes to Deceiver. At the beginning of the first battle round, but before the first turn begins, you can remove the Catan Shard of Deceiver and or up to D3 other friendly Necron units from the battlefield, then set them up again more than 12 inches away from enemy models. If you do so, this unit cannot charge in your first turn. Why is that important? Well, Necrons don't have the highest amount of mobility, and being able to redeploy, and that's 12 inches away from any model, so I could be behind them, and that is hugely important. The not being able to charge is going to really benefit more the sort of shooting side of it, but generally that is the power that the Deceiver really brings, is this sort of redeployment side. I'll go into a bit more detail in a minute when I go into sort of roles. Powers of Catan, the Catan Shard of the Deceiver knows 2 powers of Catan, and it can use 1 power at the end of each of its movement phase. Reality Unravel, if the Catan Shard Deceiver is ever reduced to 0 wounds, roll a d6 before removing it from battlefield. On a 4+, its Necrodermis tears a hole in reality. Each unit within 3 inches suffers d3 mortal wounds. So mortal wounds on there. It almost explodes like a vehicle, but a bit more reliably because it's on a 4+. And lastly, the Slave Star God, this model can never have a warlord trait. Is what it is. It does have character and fly and monster. It's important to maybe mention the fly because that's going to be quite useful, and the character is very important. So we'll go into loadout suggestions and roll. Well, there's no weapon options here except possibly the best named weapon, which is the Star God Fists. Debate with me again if you disagree. I mean, come on, if you don't shout out, I'm going to attack with Star God Fists when you fight, I simply don't know where you find joy in life. I mean, every time I use it, I'm like, Star God Fist attack. It's going to be awesome. Whether it does or not with 4 attacks is debatable, but it sounds cool. Overall impressive and fairly reliable with 3 damage. It's a shame it only has 4 attacks. I just feel one more would have pushed it into realms of, oh, that's a dangerous combat unit. But that's not where the strength of the Deceiver lies. Of course, we have the Catan powers and the Grand Illusion. We will go into Catan powers a little bit later. I'll just do a wee segment on its own for that. But the Grand Illusion is where it is at. The Deceiver and D3 units redeployment can be absolutely devastating when used right. Of course, no guarantee because it's a random amount of units that move, but it can be pretty darn impressive. I once moved the Deceiver, a Catacomb Barge, and 2 20-man Necron warrior squads because I got 3 units plus the Deceiver to move. I moved them behind my opponent's lines. I got first turn, I moved them up so that the Necron warriors were within rapid fire range. I then used the My Will Be Done stratagem, you know, the one where you can basically do My Will Be Done twice, which gave me 80 rapid firing Gauss shots hitting on 2s, and this was targeted on Devastators that were in cover. Lit those guys up and wiping out all the missile shots. I think there was 8 missiles, 4 in each unit. There was 5 guys in each, 4 missiles in each unit, 5 guys in them. And you know, with a fairly dangerous unit of the Deceiver and the Catacomb Command Barge, it was really, you know, making people think, do I want to charge them? Probably not, because then they would jump on a unit that came in for retaliation. This pretty much won me the game turn 1. It was absolutely devastating. I also had like wraiths coming up the other side and just working as a pincer movement straight into my opponent first turn. And it was devastating. It really, really did hurt them quite a wee bit. This I only find is useful when you use ranged units. Melee units would have to wait a turn before they engage, which sure, it gets them into position, but you can imagine your opponent's going to do everything to guarantee that they don't make it, because obviously they don't want to be charged, because that would be pretty bad. So that's kind of, you know, the benefit when you want to make sure it is going to be a ranged unit versus a melee unit. Though maybe getting them into range is helpful, it just means that first turn there's no chance of it. Saying that though, you're probably never going to make it first turn charge anyway, depending on what units you brought. So that's fair on that side. You know, mix it in with like things like the Veil of Darkness, which allows you to move another unit and a character, and then you can do Nemesis Andric and Oberon's movement trickery as well. You can move a fair amount of units, which can be quite deadly in your first turn. Pretty cool and interesting to hear how people have used this to proper effect. Probably the way I mentioned is one of the best ways to use it. You know, that's what I say. To ensure a huge amount of firepower is in the preferred position. Relying on turn 1 and getting the most units through several random dice rolls there, but when it works, it is beautiful. So a bit of random luck in that one, but it's good. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to hear about other people's sort of stories in this in Deceiver. Have used the Deceiver well, where you've managed to drop in units. Maybe your opponent didn't know what the Deceiver did. I know there was one game David did against an opponent, and he used the Deceiver. They had no idea what was happening with it, and they deployed very differently. And then the Deceiver came in with the other units and absolutely destroyed. So I just think the Deceiver can really bring the pain when, you know, just as a surprise element to your opponent that they just might not be able to bank on. Dynasty code traits, none to be had. It makes sense. I don't even want to, you know, even think about them because it's an enslaved star god. It literally has a rule called enslaved star god. I don't think they're going to get dynasty codes, which are for these robotic creatures that go along with them. So nope, won't even entertain the thought of them. Catan powers, so this is the part I love about Catans. They add a lot more interesting powers to Catans to make them work and to add damage in a variety of ways, from a variety of different differences, and they have different rules that work for different types of units. I won't go into the powers individually as such. If you want to do that, you can have a look at my Necron overview video, which gives you them in a bit more detail. However, I will mention my favourite combinations and why. So firstly, the one that I always think is 9 times out of 10 usually take is Cosmic Fire. Possibly my favourite one of the lot of them. It's an AoE power that can attack a lot of different units around the Catan, awarding a very aggressive playstyle and effective if your opponent rocks multiple small units. In the right position, you can cause a lot of hurt just right round your Catan, and there's very little your opponent can do to stop it, as you're likely going to be deceiving, you know, the Deceiver to get into a better position and be a bit more aggressive. You could essentially work as a small bomb and just really get a good AoE effect and cause a lot of mortal wounds that your opponent did not expect to suffer. With such close combat power, you really want to have another ranged one to back it up with, and the one I find best is Sky of Falling Stars. Handy to target multiple units, and even if they are like 5-man squads, you're still going to reliably put out those mortal wounds. Other one to think about if your opponent is maybe using small, you know, single target units, you know, for instance, might be using knights, then you might want to think about Antimatter Meteor. It's okay and has a huge range, but you don't get to decide your target because it has to be the closest one. So it's not the most ideal for me. I prefer Sky Falling Stars when it's the ranged one, because you get to pick your units and it can do multiple units, versus the Antimatter Meteor, which is only one unit. It may do d6 mortal wounds if you get a 6, but most likely it's going to go as d3. But it just means that you're also stuck with the closest one, so your opponent can mitigate it a wee bit there as well. Seismic Assault and Time's Arrow are okay. Time's Arrow is a good way to target characters, but it's very unreliable. You need a good dice roll to get that one. And Seismic Assault is good against hordes, but I wouldn't count on it. You know, once the hordes begin to go down, then they die. Hordes don't tend to have the best protection, so you don't really want to put mortal wounds on hordes as much. There might be some, I mean, you've got Tyrannids who can do loads of minuses to hit, so being able to get an absolutely reliable amount of mortal wounds on them would be okay. But generally, I don't find it the best one to go for on the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. That does change with other Catans though. Obviously I'm talking about the big one. Stratagem recommendations. Now that's going to be the brutal one, because you know, Catans do have 2 dedicated ones. This is Wrath of the Catan, which is 2 command points, and Cosmic Power, which is 1 command point. But I'm not going to mention them. I really don't rate their stratagems. You know, what they do is the model can replace one of its Catan powers. If you're replacing one of the Catan powers, I think that's a bit poor show, and sort of you're you know, planning out of the game on what you want the role of Catan. And I just think that it just doesn't, you know, you're giving up a command point to get a replace an ability, which I think is not as ideal. Maybe if it was add an ability, it would be good, but to replace one, I just don't think it's worth it. I think with pre-planning you'd be fine either way. In Wrath of Catan means you're going to cast, immediately use the power, you know, a random power rolled. It's 2 command points to get a random ability that you may not even be viable to use. For instance, one that is like horde abilities, that might not be so ideal, and then maybe you're going to get, you know, is it Seismic Assault? No, it's Time's Arrow, which might be completely pointless. It just depends on your positioning, and then you make a poor d6 roll and you're like, well, that ability is pointless. I just don't rate them. I don't think they are the best. If there was one that said you could choose another Catan power that you've already got, because you choose 2 of them and you can only use one, if there's like 1 command point you can use the other one, then maybe that would be great. But I just don't rate those stratagems at all, and I heavily think if their stratagems need to be reevaluated, it needs to be the Catan ones, because I just don't see the viability of them generally. I can see why they're there and a bit interesting to have, but I just simply don't rate them, and that's why I didn't really write up a stratagem recommendation, because I can't recommend them. Yep, that was a bit of a brutal way to end that one. And that is the end of the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. Yep, it's all about that repositioning. Yeah, it can cause damage itself, but that reposition is absolutely what you're paying for, and it's going to be focused on how you use the other units around your army to get the main benefit from it. So please comment, share, like and subscribe. Let me know what you've done with Catan Shard of the Deceiver, what sort of ambush techniques you have set up. I'm very interested to hear about that one, because that will depend on people's play styles, what they do with it, what units get the main benefit from it. I would love to hear what people's ones have worked with them. You've heard an analogy from me, you've heard me retail one of David's in which it worked. Let me know yours and I'll be very eager to read them. Also check us out on social media where you can see upcoming projects we are working on. I am currently still working on Chaos, I think, at the moment, but I am looking at my next project. I'll need to see what that's going to be What would you guys like to see more on the channel, as well as check us out on Patreon to help support the channel, bring you more content, because we absolutely love doing so. So thanks again, and we'll see you on our Tabletop Assault Battle Report.